Magandang araw sa inyong lahat. I am Marjorie Pula, and another topic na naman ang ating aalamin ngayong araw when it comes to our updates on PFRS, our standard. And let's proceed to our today's agenda today, which are the PFRS 3, 4, 5, and 6. I will not make it any longer. Let's proceed to our first topic, PFRS 3, business combinations. Later, we will see IFRS 3, IAS, or the International Accounting Standard, because we all know that unlike other countries, nirevise nila ang IFRS to their state. May mga revisions sila sa mga standards. However, in the Philippines, we adopted as is yung IFRS 3 and also the IAS as is sa international. So later, you will see IFRS and also the IAS, which is the PAS in the Philippines, and the Philippine Financial Reporting Standard, which is the International Financial Reporting Standard. And let's proceed to the overview of this topic. We all know na we already discussed this, the theory, the application of the theory in practice problem. However, today we are going to see the timeline of these updates. Paano siya nag-come up sa gantong state niya ngayon sa ating standard. We have here, just like what I have said, ay makikita na natin ngayon ang IFRS 3. Because of our reference is IAS Plus. Ang website na pwede nating pagkunan ng reference when it comes to our standards. Sinasabi na lang naman dito yung napag-aralan natin in the theories, which is the business combinations are accounted for using the acquisition method. In acquisition method, kaya nangyayari ang business combination. It's either you are boosting two business, or you are surviving one business. And we all know the difference between the merger and the combination. Kapag sinabi nating, or I mean the consolidation, pag sinabi nating merger, A company plus B company is equal to A company or B company. So, may nag-exist lang na isa na sa dalawang companies na nag-combine. When it comes to consolidation naman, A company plus B company is equal to C. So, a new company formed. Balik tayo dito. We have acquisition method. Kaya, in business combination kasi, you're acquiring something, and that is to acquire an asset or through stock method. Dalawa yan. Asset method and stock method. And it is also stated here na assets acquired and liabilities assumed to be measured at their fair values at the acquisition date. So, let's see what happens to the measurement. Fair value ba? Or historical value? Mga ganyan. And it is the revision of IFRS 3 happens in 2008, and yun yung nag-i-exist today. However, marami pa yung pinanggalingan, and let's see kung saan nga ba nanggaling ito. Saan siya nanggaling before it comes to the state ngayon na IFRS 3 revised as 2008. Yan. Let's go. Here, timeline of updates. First is in our updates on PFRS 3, April 2001. So what happens here? In April 2001, the International Accounting Standards Board, which is the standard setting body of who issues the standard, adopted IAS 22 business combinations. So, nalaman natin ngayon na hindi siya as is na PFRS 3 or IFRS 3. However, nanggaling siya sa business combination IAS 22, which is originally been issued by the International Accounting Standard Committee, yung IASC noon, na bago na ngayon also, in October 1998. IAS 22 was itself a revised version of IAS 22 business combination that was issued in November 1983. So, meron na ang IAS 22 noong 1983. However, na-revise ulit siya noong 1998. Yun lang naman ang nangyari noong April 2001. Let's jump to 2002. We have, on December 5, 2002, the International Accounting Standard Board has proposed major revisions. So, ano nga ba itong mga revisions na to? they propose major revisions to its standard on accounting for business combination and intangible assets. However, we are going to discuss only the business combination updates or revisions. The most significant proposals are to prohibit the use of the pooling or uniting of interest method of accounting for business combinations, and to require that goodwill and other intangible assets with indefinite lives be tested for impairment but not amortized. Pooling has already been banned in Australia, Canada, Hong Kong, New Zealand, and the United States. We all know that goodwill generally is not accounted when acquiring a company. However, dito, it is stated na kung in business combination, the indefinite lives of intangible assets or goodwill should not be amortized, but it should be impaired. Ano nga ba ito? Ano nga ba yung amortization and the impairment? If we say amortization kasi, it is the concept which is to account for the expense of using up an intangible assets value to produce revenue. Ito yung historical value less accumulated depreciation. Yung impairment kasi naman is we measured it in determining fair value less yung mga kung mataas yung fair value less than the intangible asset current valuations, nagkakaroon ng mga revaluation surplus or loss. And it is stated here that they preferred the impairment rather than amortize. Let's go to 2004 updates. On March 31, 2004, issuance of new accounting standard including IFRS 3. So, nangyari na, ito na yung issuance of IFRS 3. In March 2004, the board replaced IAS 22 and other interpretations to the issuance of IFRS 3 business combinations. So, ano yung ni-replace ng IFRS 3? All business combinations are accounted for using the purchase method. Also, pooling of interest is prohibited. Goodwill may not be amortized but must be tested for impairment at least annually. We determine the fair value and the carrying value of the intangible assets or the goodwill. Also, post-combination restructuring costs are not accrued as liabilities at the time of the acquisition. Yun yung mga main na nilalaman ng IFRS 3 in issuance of 2004. And other meron pa silang initial that time. However, isa lang yun. Isa lang ang IFRS 3 sa initial nilang standard on March 31, 2004. On April 2004 29, this is the proposed amendments to IFRS 3 business combinations, combination by contract loan or involvement mutual entities. Nagkaroon siguro ng mga questions about the contract loan or involving mutual entities. Kaya 1 month after issuance of the March 31, 2004 IFRS 3 they issued an exposure draft. It is a proposed amendments. What is this? The amendments would add to the scope of IFRS 3. So it is they are adding this to the IFRS 3. We have combinations in which separate entities are brought together to form a reporting entity by contract alone without the obtaining of an ownership interest, and business combinations involving mutual entities. Both were excluded from IFRS 3 when it was issued last month. So they are involving it to these amendments. Including these transactions in IFRS 3 would mean that an acquirer must be identified. So in our theory, when we are in the third year, we already discussed the acquirer and the acquiree, the two main characters of business combination, and the acquirer must account for the combination using the purchase method. The exposure draft would not change the IFRS 3 itself. However, may mga dinadagdag lang kasi. If finalized, the proposal would be applied to business combinations agreed to on or after 31 March 2004, same as the IFRS 3. So parang na-add lang talaga siya sa initial last month. Let's go to the 2005 updates. On June 30, 2005, this is also a proposed exposure draft to the published IFRS 3 containing joint proposals to improve and align the accounting for business combination. Wala namang gaanong nangyari sa event na ito. They only propose amendments again when it comes to improving the accounting for business combinations. In 2008, January 10, 2008, ito na yung revised IFRS 3 and related revisions to IAS 27 or the consolidated and separate financial statements. This applies to business combination for which the acquisition date is on or after the beginning of the first annual reporting period beginning on or after 1 July 2009. So, yun nga, some of the significant amendments to IFRS 3 first is the acquisition costs. Costs of issuing debt or equity instruments are accounted for under IAS 39 or the financial instrument recognition and measurement. All other costs associated with the acquisition must be expensed. Yun nga, pag-aralan natin na may mga certain costs na ini-expense and kinakapitalize, including reimbursement to the acquiree for bearing some of the acquisition costs. Examples of costs to be expensed include finder's fees, kasi advisory, legal, accounting, valuation, and other professional or consulting fees, and general administrative costs, including the costs of maintaining an internal acquisition department. Yun, pag nag-solve tayo ng problems, we are going to apply this. What are the expense outright and yung mga kinakapitalize ng mga cost. We have here also the contingent consideration. If the amount of contingent consideration changes as a result of a post-acquisition event, accounting for the change in the consideration depends on whether the additional consideration is an equity instrument or cash or other assets paid or owed. If it is equity, the original amount is not remeasured. If the additional consideration is cash or other assets paid or owed, the change amount is recognized in profit or loss. If the amount of consideration changes because of new information about the fair value of the amount of consideration at acquisition date, then retrospective restatement is required. So, magulo siya sa theory sa updates. However, we can apply this kind of theories in practice problem. Also, we have the significance of the goodwill and non-controlling interest in this revision. An option is added to IFRS 3 to permit an entity to recognize 100% of the goodwill. Generally, just like our practice problem, we excluded the goodwill when acquiring a business. However, meron siyang exception to the rule na if stated na merong pwedeng i-acquire ng isang business ang 100% goodwill of that business, ay pwede. It is permitted so. Bakit siya pinipermit? Example is yung kilalang business. Example, you're acquiring a Jollibee. Jollibee is well-known business. And you're acquiring that. Then, yung goodwill niya kasi is yung mga trademark niya is already an asset. Kilala na siya ng mga tao. That's why it is permitted that you can capitalize that goodwill as your asset. With the increased amount of goodwill also increasing the non-controlling interest in the net asset of acquired entity. This is known as the full goodwill method. Such non-controlling interest is reported as part of consolidated equity. The full goodwill option may be elected on a transaction by transaction basis. So, hindi siya always. Kasi generally, ang goodwill nga is not included as acquiring asset ng business combination. So, case-to-case basis lang siya. Pagkilala or it is stated on the problem na goodwill is included, then you have to include the goodwill as an asset. On May 6, 2010, IFRS business combination, it is annual improvements of 2010. Ano yung mga nangyari dito? measurement of non-controlling interest, unreplaced and voluntary replace share-based payment awards, transitional requirements for contingent consideration from a business combination that occurred before the effective date of PFRS 3. So, sabi nila, ano ang mga gagawin namin sa mga business combination that happens before the revisions of 2008. So, karoon sila ng mga amendment to clarify those kind of questions. Next is our updates on December 2013. So, ang nangyari naman dito is also, this is also an amendment by annual improvements to IFRS 2010 to 2012 cycle. Anong meron dito? Accounting for contingent consideration in a business combination, and it clarifies that contingent consideration that is classified as an asset or liability shall be measured at fair value at each reporting date. Palaging fair value ang business combination. On December 2013 also, nagkaroon ng scope of exception for joint ventures. So, magkaiba kasi ang joint ventures and also the business combination. Pag sinabi kasi natin joint ventures, example, the architect company and also the engineer company ay na-task to do, nag-combine sila to do a government project. It is not a business combination kasi hindi naman sila nag-combine. However, they are joined for a specific project. So, it clarifies that IFRS 3 excludes from its scope the accounting for the formation of a joint arrangement of the joint arrangement itself. Yan, papalapit tayo. 2017, December 12. Business combination and IFRS 11 joint arrangement. The amendments to IFRS 3 clarify that when an entity obtains control of a business that is a joint operation, it measures previously held interest in that business. The amendments to IFRS 11 obtains joint control of a business that is a joint operation. The entity does not remeasure previously held interest in that business. So, kapag kasi joint arrangement, wala namang specific na merger or consolidation nangyari. So, hindi ka nag-acquire. However, you are only joined together, business to business. You are separate still. Kaya sabi dito, it clarifies na yung mga does not remeasure previously held interest in that business. Ano nga ba ang previously held interest? Review lang natin that previously held interest is, example, it is a stages acquisition, wherein the business you acquired 10% before, and now reporting date 50%, in all may 60% interest ka na. However, your current is the 50% and your previously held interest is the 10%. Magkaiba pa rin sila. Hindi mo sila pwedeng 60% agad-agad. You have to separate them to the current and to the previously held interest. Now, we are going to the October 22, 2018 amendment by definition of a business. So, magkaiba naman sila. Kanina mga amendment by annual improvements. Ngayon, meron silang ginawa as they clarify the definition of the business on IFRS 3. IFRS 3 only, they clarify that to be considered a business, an acquired set of activities and assets must include. So, may input. An input and a substantive process, so may process that together significantly contribute to the ability to create outputs. The outputs is the profits. It narrowed the definitions of a business and of output by focusing on goods and services provided to customers and by removing the reference to an ability to reduce costs. So overall, ang definition of the business is may input, process, and output. Input is, example, human resource, assets, or cash, like that. Process, it is merong mga systems on your business and systems of organization, and your output is may profit ka, may end result. On May 14, 2022, nangyari ang International Accounting Standard Board has published reference to the conceptual framework. Yun nga, hindi align kasi yung ating conceptual framework sa IFRS 3 kasi it is revised. So, the changes in reference to the conceptual framework update the IFRS so that it refers to the 2018 kasi meron tayong revised na conceptual framework on 2018 instead of the 1989 framework. And to add to IFRS 3 a requirement that for transaction and other events within the scope of IAS 37 or the provisions of contingent liabilities and contingent assets, or IFRIC 21 or the levies, and acquire applies to IAS 37 or IFRIC 21 instead, the conceptual framework to identify the liabilities it has assumed in a business combination, and add to PFRS 3 an explicit statement that an acquirer does not recognize contingent assets required in a business combination. So that's the updates on PFRS 3 as of today. The updates still nangyari pa lang siya on 2020. So wala pang major revisions happens on 2021 to 2022 as of 2023. Yan. Maraming nangyari on 2001 hanggang 2020. Now, we are going to summarize some of the key differences between the IFRS 3, our recent, and the IFRS 3, the 2004, which is the first issued IFRS 3 na pinalitan ang ating IAS 22. So, when it comes to the transaction costs, acquisition costs such as advisor's fees, stamp duty, and similar costs cannot be included in the measurement of goodwill. So, it is an example of mga ina-expense out na mga kind of acquisition costs. Calculation of goodwill, the very important in business combination is first the calculation of goodwill, kasi kung mali ka na sa goodwill mo, mali na lahat. Pre-existing ownership interests are measured fair value at acquisition date, so always fair value tayo when it comes to measurement of ownership mapa-assets. But liabilities cannot be measured fair value because it is a liability at cost. Option to measure non-controlling interest on the basis of fair value or net assets. So, transaction by transaction basis pa rin ito. Contingent consideration, fair value accounting at acquisition date. So, palaging fair value nga, sabi ko nga, ang business combination. Subsequent changes do not impact goodwill but are accounted for separately. So, itong retrospect, yung other accounting for that subsequent changes. Another key areas is transaction arising in conjunction with business combination. And new detailed guidance of the split between compensation and consideration for replacement, share-based payments, awards, settlement of pre-existing relationships can result in a gain or loss. Unrecognized deferred taxes no longer impact goodwill or on subsequent measurement. Recognition and measurement, reliable measurement exclusion for intangible assets removed. New guidance on indemnification assets are assets not expected to be used. And changes in ownership interest, buying or selling a minority interest in a subsidiary only impacts equity. Loss of control requires fair value of retained holding and recycling of reserves. So, yun naman yung mga key differences between the IFRS 3 2008 and IFRS 3 2004. So, maraming theories tayo na-discuss. However, we can use this in answering problem of example of the business combination. Yung pag-measure mo at fair value or at cost, amortize or impairment. Yan. Let us review. IFRS 3 2008 resulted from a joint project with the US Financial Accounting Standard Board and replaced IFRS 3 2004. Nga. FASB issued a similar standard in December 2007. The revisions result in a high degree of convergence between IFRS and US GAAP in accounting for business combinations, although some potentially significant differences remain. So, may mga significant differences naman na still nag-stay. They remained on our standard. The main key point here is that business combination is very important nowadays because malalaman natin na may improvement when it comes to a business kasi they're expanding yung nakikita natin, or they are seeking new projects happening in a business world. Yun naman ang very important ng IFRS 3 or the PFRS 3. It is very important to know how to know the updates of this kind of standard because marami ang mga nag-merge, nagko-consolidate because of certain factors. Sabi ko nga, pwedeng sinasalba niya yung isang business or they just want to boost their company as well as the acquiring company. Yun yung main. So, that's the updates of PFRS 3. Let's go to PFRS 4. Thank you.
Hi, I am Maria Belen Palakpag and I will be discussing about the PFRS 4 insurance contracts with the learning objectives including state the scope and applicability of PFRS 17, define an insurance contract, and describe the level of aggregation and measurement of insurance contracts. But before the more important and wider information about this topic, we will discuss first the brief background so that magkakaroon tayo ng idea and also impression about what insurance contract updates and also their history. So for the next slide, we have here the brief background. PFRS 4 or the Philippine Financial Reporting Standards 4 ay na-adapt siya from the IFRS 4, which is the very first guidance from IASB accounting for insurance contracts. And ano nga ba yung pinaka-latest happening or updates about this standard? So we have here IFRS 4 will be replaced by IFRS 17, which was issued in May 2017 and will take effect on January 1, 2022. IFRS 4 has been amended in 2005 and 2016. Insurance contracts have been intentionally excluded from other IFRS standards gaya ng IFRS 17 about the revenue from contracts with customers, IAS 37, yung provisions, contingent liabilities, and contingent assets, and yung IFRS 9, which is the financial instruments. Now, let's go deeper with the topic. Now na aware na tayo na napalitan na as PFRS 17, ang PFRS 4, now let's go with its importance and also about its definition. So, the accounting practices for insurance contracts have been diverse and often differed from practices in other sectors. So, prior to the completion of PFRS 17, interim standard, PFRS 4 insurance contract, ay in-issue po siya to make limited improvements to the accounting for and disclosure of insurance contracts. Ayan, PFRS 4 basically allowed for insurance companies to retain their accounting policies under their previous GAAP. And PFRS 4, previously, ito yung standard. PFRS 4, interim standard siya, meaning, temporarily, nandyan yan to govern or to standardize kasi nga, not yet finalized yung appropriate standard. Yan, si PFRS 4 or 17 are not finalized. Ayan. But PFRS 4, may liberality yan. Yung mga insurance company, sa kanilang application ng insurance nila, kung paano nila ina-account. Ngayon, pagdating po ni PFRS 4, nung na-enact, nung naging effective siya and na-standardize siya. Ayan. And the reason behind bakit natagalan yung pag-standardize ng standard na ito, because insurance contract ay napaka-dynamic na topic, napaka-complicated, kumbaga marami siyang pasikot-sikot. And now, PFRS 17 applies to the accounting for insurance and reinsurance contracts, including investment contracts with discretionary participation features by an insurer. And PFRS 17 supersedes PFRS 4. So, yung PFRS 17 prescribes the principle for paano ba nire-recognize, paano mini-measure, paano pinipresent, and of course, paano ba dinidisclose ang insurance contracts by an insurer. So, PFRS 17 applies to insurance and reinsurance contracts issued by an insurer, reinsurance contracts held by an insurer, and investment contracts with discretionary participation features issued by insurer. So yan, laging nababanggit yung insurer dito. Ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng insurer? So later on, mas malalaman pa natin about this word. Ayan. But, insurer po, no? Entity that issued insurance contract. Sila po yung nag-i-issue ng insurance contract sa mga tao. And they are the insurance provider. They have the responsibility to compensate or indemnify once na nangyari yung insured event. Ayan, ano yung insured event? For example, yung accident. For example, nabangga yung kotse ng isang tao. Kapag nakalagay sa policy mo or sa contract mo na kapag affected yung sasakyan, which is may insurance yung sasakyan, so yung insurance provider ng sasakyan mo, yung insured object, ay meron silang responsibility to indemnify or compensate you. Ayan, so for the next slide, we have here the definition of insurance contract. An insurance contract is a contract under which one party, the issuer, accepts significant insurance risk from another party, the policyholder, by agreeing to compensate the policyholder if a specified uncertain future event, the insured event, adversely affects the policyholder. So here, from the definition, si insurer, siya yung issuer, siya yung insurance provider. And sabi dito, tumatanggap siya ng significant insurance risk. Ayan. Later on, no, kapag wala po kasing significant insurance risk, ayan, insignificant siya, walang matatawag na insurance contract. And also, nabanggit dyan si policy holder. Si policy holder, siya yung nagbabayad ng insurance. Siya yung nag-avail ng insurance, nakatanggap ng compensation, and also, siya yung adversely affected. Adversely affected meaning, ayan, may negative effect. And also, nasabi din dyan yung insurance risk, meaning, kapag yung insurance event ay nangyari, ayan, merong risk na need na mag-compensate or mag-indemnify si insurer para kay policy holder. And also, yung insured event, nabanggit din dyan, insured event meaning uncertain. No? For example, yung tao patanda ng patanda, tataas yung premium niya or yung babayaran niya. Also, for example, no, yung health insurance natin. Before tayo mag-avail ng insurance contract, syempre required tayo na kumuha ng medical certificate or medical examination. Kasi for example, yung tao is may sakit or may cancer like that, they will not accept this person kasi baka isipin nila na kumukuha ka ng insurance knowing na mayroon kang sakit or cancer. And of course, the significant insurance risk in the part of the insurer ay tataas. So they will not accept this kind of application. So, nandiyan na rin, policyholder meaning a party that has a right to compensation under an insurance contract if an insured event occurs. An insured event meaning an uncertain future event that is covered by an insurance contract and creates insurance risk. For the next one, we have here the essential elements in the definition of an insurance contract. So first, we have the transfer of significant insurance risk. Transfer of significant insurance risk, there is a transfer of significant insurance risk from the insured policyholder to the insurer or the insurance provider. So, gaya nga ng sinabi natin kanina, once na nangyari yung insured event, merong responsibility si insurer na mag-transfer ng significant insurance risk kay policyholder. Kasi nga po, di ba, may adverse effect na sinasabi natin kanina na from insured event, yung sasagot para doon ay si insurer, siya yung mag-compensate. And also, given the fact na stipulated ito sa contract. Next, we have here naman yung payment from the insurance premium. Generally, the insured pays to a common fund from which losses are paid. However, not all insurance contracts have explicit premiums. Example, insurance cover bundled with some credit card contracts. So, dito nabanggit si premium. Premium, ibig sabihin, ito yung binabayaran ni policyholder. Dito kinukuha ni insurer yung pang-compensate po niya. So, kapag may binabayaran si policyholder, then dito din kinukuha ni insurer yung pang-compensate. So, parang bank function siya, right? Pero what is the difference between the function of banko nga po ba? And also the insurance provider? So, sa banko, napakaliit po yung interest in saving. Yan. But, in insurance, may marireceive na additional returns at the end of policy. Kumbaga, ito yung advantages ng insurance policies or investments other than banks. But of course, mas secured yung pera mo sa bangko. Gaya ng mutual funds, stocks, yan. Ayan, there are also banks na nag-o-offer din ng insurance. Actually, yung iba nga, not only insurance, but also meron ding mga investment to attract policyholders. At we as responsible citizens, no, bago tayo pumapasok sa insurance contract, syempre, we must do our own research bago tayo pumasok. No? Pwede natin i-check yung contribution per month ng insurance provider po na iyan. And so on and so forth. And for the third essential element, we have here the indemnification against loss. So, indemnification against loss, the insurer agrees to identify or indemnify the insured or other beneficiaries against loss or liability from specified events and circumstances that may occur or be discovered during a specified period. So, if the insured event nga ay nangyari, then, i-compensate ni insurer or insurance provider si policyholder para sa mga loss or liability na ina-incur niya from that insured event. Actually, dapat nga align ito or under sa policy insurance contract nila. Kasi po, di ba po, we are fully aware that insurance company are very strict po when it comes to this. And also, we have here naman yung mga significant insurance risk or the uncertain future event. So first, we have the risk or uncertainty. Risk or uncertainty, ito yung sinasabi natin kaninang significant dapat siya. Risk, ito yung possibility of loss or injury once na nangyari yung uncertain future event. Ayan. And risk po ay pwedeng maging speculative or pure risk, no? Speculative meaning, nagre-result siya to either gain or loss. Pero kapag pure risk, results only to loss. So, yung insurance risk includes only pure risk. And we have also here the insurance risk. Ito yung risk other than financial risk. Yan, transferred from the holder of a contract to the issuer. And also for the third bullet, we have a contract that transfer only an insignificant insurance risk is not an insurance contract. So ito po yung sinasabi natin kanina, right? Na kapag walang significant insurance risk, walang insurance contract. And for the last bullet, a contract that exposes the issuer to financial risk is not an insurance contract unless it also exposes the issuer to significant insurance risk. Ayan. So dito po no, financial risk general rule, hindi siya insurance contract. Makukonsider lang siya as insurance contract if exposes nga po yung issuer to significant insurance risk. So dito napapasok po yung topic na reinsurance contract. Ayan. Ayan, so for the next slide, we have here the examples of insurance contracts, including yung insurance against theft or damage, insurance against product liability, professional liability, civil liability or legal expenses, yan, life insurance and prepaid funeral plans, life contingent annuities and pensions, disability and medical cover, surety bonds, fidelity bonds, performance bonds, and bid bonds, product warranties issued by another party for goods sold by a manufacturer, dealer, or retailer, title insurance, travel insurance, catastrophe bonds that provide for reduced payments of principal, interest, or both if a specified event adversely affects the issuer of the bond, and also insurance swaps and other contracts that require payment depending on changes in climatic, geological, or other physical variables that are specific to a party to the contract. So, for the next slide, kung merong mga examples ng insurance contracts, meron din pong mga exemptions. Ayan. Meron din mga examples ng items na ito na not considered siya as insurance contract. So, gaya ng contracts that do not transfer significant insurance risk to the issuer. Ayan. Sabi na natin yan kanina na kapag walang significant insurance risk, walang insurance contract. Self-insurance. So, bakit siya hindi insurance contract? Kasi nga, self-insurance dito is walang contract. Next, gambling contract. So, eto, pumapasok dito yung insurance fraud. Yan, derivatives that expose a party to financial risk but not insurance risk, including weather derivatives. And letter E, credit-related guarantees. So, next naman is the legal principles of insurance. The principal objective of every insurance contract is to provide financial protection to the insured in case of occurrence of an uncertain future event. Neither the insured nor the insurer shall misuse an insurance contract to unjustly enrich himself at the expense of the other. So, dito po, no, bawal silang mag-commit ng insurance fraud. Bawal lokohin ni insured or si policy holder, si insurer or si insurance provider. For example, nangyari yung accident and then it is an intentional siya pala yung may kasalanan. Sinet up niya ito so that makatanggap siya ng payout or makakuha siya from insurance provider ng compensation or indemnification. So si insurance provider very strict in this part, and pag nalaman niyang there is a fraud in this situation, si insurer hahabulin niya si policy holder. So, for the next slide naman, we have the following legal principles of insurance. So, first, we have the principle of insurable interest. So, sabi dito, the insured has an insurable interest in the property if he is benefited by the property's existence and prejudiced by its destruction. So, ibig sabihin, yan, nagagamit niya. Meron siyang the right to use, meron siyang the right to enjoy. And kapag nawala iyon sa kanya, there is a negative effect, no? Kaya nga sabi dito, prejudiced by its destruction. And also next, we have principle of utmost good faith. All insurance contracts must be negotiated with utmost honesty and fairness because the contracting parties that have the same access to relevant information. So, between the party, dapat mag-exist yung honesty, no? So that maiwasan yung mga insurance fraud na iyan. And we have here the principle of indemnity. The insured is compensated for the loss he incurred and reverted back to his previous financial condition before the occurrence of the loss event. Principle of indemnity, gaya ng napag-usapan kanina, no? Kapag nangyari yung insured event, merong responsibility or obligation si insurance provider na i-compensate or bayaran si policyholder. And we have here the principle of contribution. This principle applies when the insured obtains insurance from more than one insurer. So ano naman po ang ibig sabihin nito? For example, no, isang tao kumuha siya ng insurance from two different policyholder. Kahit na same yung nature ng policy niya. Ayan. Kung ano yung actual loss, yun lang yung marireceive. Ayan. For example, kumuha ka ng insurance para sa sasakyan so that in case na ma-involve in accident or damages, insured. Ayan. Then, kumuha ka rin ng insurance. Let's say for instance, accident insurance. And then, one day na-involve ka sa accident. So, nangyari yung insured event, meron kang payout na matatanggap. Because may insurance yung sasakyan and ikaw. Siyempre, there are damages ngayon. So, hindi pwedeng both na insurance provider, kung saan nag-avail ka ng insurance para sa sarili mo and for your vehicle or car, hindi yung dalawang insurance provider, ayan, ang gagastos sa iyo, full. Kumbaga, each of the insurance provider, bibigyan ka ng full payment. Kasi dito po, bawal po ang double compensation. Kung ano yung actual losses mo, yan lang po yung amount na marireceive mo. Also, depende na rin sa pag-uusapan ng two insurance provider kung paano nila hahatiin yung loss para mabayaran ka. And next, we have the principle of subrogation naman. Subrogation means substituting one entity. Example, the insurer or for another entities. The insured legal right to collect a debt or damages. So for example, again, no, in accident, binangga yung tao. So yung tao na yan, walang kasalanan and yung tao na yan, insured siya. Then this accident caused damage. So in that situation, sino po yung magbabayad ng compensation? Yung naka-aksidente ba or yung insurance provider ng insured person po na yan? So according daw po to the law, no, ang unang hahabulin po yung naka-aksidente. But pag hindi nahabol, yan, if they will not pay you, yan, pupunta sa insurance provider. So this insurance provider, they will gonna give you payout. And si insurance company or si insurance provider na po mismo yung hahabol sa naka-aksidente. Sila na yung bahalang maghahabol doon sa naka-aksidente. Ayan. So, next naman, we have the principle of loss minimization. In cases of sudden losses or loss events, gaya ng fire, the insured should try his best to minimize the loss of his insured event or insured property, I should say, by taking all necessary steps to control and reduce the losses and save what is left of the property. Gaya ng calling the fire department in case of fire. So, dito, para makaiwas doon sa mga uncertain events or insured event, gaya ng fire nga po, no? Ayan. Dapat hindi din mag-exist dito yung insurance fraud. Gawin rin natin umiwas sa mga aksidente, no? Huwag dapat sadyain or huwag dapat maging intentional. Yung huwag natin i-set up like that because that is an insurance fraud. Kasi kapag sinadya mo yan, and then nalaman to ng insurance provider, they will not gonna give you the payout or the compensation. For example, dito din po sa example na binigay, kapag nasusunog daw po yung bahay, so dapat we should take also the necessary steps para ma-control or ma-reduce po yung losses. Gaya ng kapag nasusunog yung bahay, we should call yung fire department nga po. No? Subukan natin na patayin yung apoy. Ipakita natin na hindi natin gusto yung nangyayari. And this is unintentional. And for the last principle, we have the principle of proximate cause. When a loss is caused by more than one loss events, the closest proximate cause, not the furthest cause, is taken into consideration when determining the extent of the insurer's liability. So dito naman, it is about the legal concept naman. So proximate cause meaning, or basically means, ito yung primary cause that has been the reason for the effect. Kung ano yung cause, na kung saan dahil sa primary cause na iyon, nangyari yung effect. In this case, nangyari yung accidente or yung insured event. So, additional po, no, meron daw pong tatlong types of insurers. Yung government insurance, propriety insurance, and mutual insurance. So, now, let's proceed to the next slide about the types of insurance contract. So, we have two, direct insurance contract and reinsurance contract. Direct insurance contract, an insurance contract where the insurer directly accepts risk from the insured and assumes the sole obligation to compensate the insured in case of a loss event. So, gaya nga na sinabi natin kanina, kapag yung insured event is nangyari, merong main obligation si insurer na i-compensate or bayaran si policy holder. Ayan. So, dito sa direct insurance contract na ito, walang middleman kasi nga direct. Only yung dalawang party yung involved, si insurer at saka si insured. And we have here the reinsurance contract, an insurance contract issued by one insurer, the reinsurer, to compensate another insurer, the cedant, for losses on one or more contracts issued by the cedant. So, reinsurer meaning ito yung party that has an obligation under a reinsurance contract to compensate a cedant if an insured event occurs. And si cedant naman, ito yung the policy holder under a reinsurance contract. So, dito sa reinsurance contract, mas complicated siya, no, kaysa doon sa direct insurance contract. Medyo intricate. Yan. Dito, for example, no, si cedant, meron siyang mga insurance contract sa mga policy holder. Kumbaga, si cedant is an insurance provider din siya. And then, si cedant, pumasok siya sa insurance contract with an reinsurer. Para in case daw po na magkaroon siya ng losses sa mga insurance company niya, i-compensate siya ni reinsurer. So, si cedant, may mga insurance contract siya, no? Ngayon, if nag-take siya ng losses from that insurance contract, i-indemnify siya ni reinsurer. And for the next slide, how do we separate components from an insurance contract? So sabi dito, separating components from insurance contract. An insurance contract may contain one or more non-insurance components, gaya daw ng investment component and or service component, that need to be separated and accounted for under the standards. For this purpose, an entity applies PFRS 9 to separate an embedded derivative or a distinct investment component from a host insurance contract and applies PFRS 15 to allocate the cash flows to the separated components. So dito po sa slide na ito, yung insurance contract, pwedeng mag-contain daw po ng one or more non-insurance components, gaya po ng investment or service component, which is kailangan separated account siya for its suitable standards. So papasok dito yung pag-apply natin ng standard na PFRS 9 para i-separate an embedded derivative or distinctive investment component from that insurance contract. And also yung standard na PFRS 15 para ma-allocate or ma-distribute yung cash flows to the separated components. And also here we have the level of aggregation of insurance contracts. So, basahin na lang po natin yan, yung nasa slide na iyan. Ano yung level of aggregation of insurance contracts. And now, for the next slide, pumunta po tayo doon sa mga principles. Paano ba tayo nagre-recognize? Or paano natin mini-measure, pine-present, and dinidisclose yung insurance contracts? Simply, ito yung tawag po dito is yung accounting models natin dito sa standard po na ito. We have here 3 general model. Pertaining kung paano nga natin na-recognize yung insurance contracts. And then pangalawa, yung premium allocation approach. Ito yung simplified measurement of a group of insurance contracts if at the group's inception, the entity reasonably expects that the simplification would result to an approximation of the general model or kung yung coverage period of each contract in the group is 1 year or less. And also, the modifications to the general model for onerous contracts. Onerous contracts meaning if yung total of its fulfillment cash flows, any previously recognized acquisition cash flows, and any cash flows arising from the contract at initial recognition date is a net outflow. So itong net flow na ito recognize siya as a loss sa P&L or profit and loss. And reinsurance contracts held and investment contracts with discretionary participation features. And now, let's proceed to the next slide. Paano ba natin na-recognize ang insurance contract? So sabi dito, a group of reinsurance contract is recognized from the earliest of the following: the beginning of the coverage period of the group of contracts, the date when the first main payment from a policyholder in the group becomes due, and for a group of onerous contracts when the group becomes onerous. And now, for its initial measurement, a group of insurance contract is initially measured at the total of the fulfillment cash flows and the contractual service margin. And so, about this naman, madidiscuss yan when i-apply na natin tong standard na to sa mga problems. And also, kung merong initial measurement, meron ding subsequent measurement. Ayan, so let's read this part na lang. Andyan na po sa slide. So, nabanggit po dito yung contractual service margin. So, yung contractual service margin, at the end of reporting period, ito yung nagre-represent as the balance of unearned profit relating to future service. And for the recognition or paano natin dinire-recognize ang insurance contract, so, an insurance contract is recognized when, if it is extinguished. For instance daw, yung obligation in the insurance contracts nag-expire or na-discharge or na-cancel, and the contract is modified and the modification meets any of the conditions for the recognition. So, additional na i-take note natin about this is changes in cash flows caused by a modification that does not meet any of the conditions are treated siya as changes in the estimates. And for the last slide, we have here paano natin pinipresent si insurance contracts. So we have here presentation, statement of financial position. The carrying amounts of the following groups are presented separately in the statement of financial position. A. Insurance contracts issued that are assets. B. Insurance contracts issued that are liabilities. C. Reinsurance contracts held that are assets. And D. Reinsurance contracts held that are liabilities. Ayan. So, sa financial performance naman or yung sa statement of income and expenses, so the amounts recognized in the statements of profit or loss and other comprehensive income are disaggregated into the following. Ayan. So, insurance service result comprising insurance revenue and insurance service expenses and insurance finance income or expenses. So, yung CA or yung carrying amount of a group, gaya ng any asset or liability, recognized for insurance acquisition cash flows. Also, ang additional na i-take note natin here is that income and expenses from reinsurance contracts held ay presented siya separately from income or expenses from insurance contracts issued. So, that's all for the topic insurance contract. Thank you. And now, let's listen to the next presenter.
Good day everyone, I'm Ann Pilapil and I will be discussing the updates in PFRS 5, which is non-current asset held for sale and discontinued operations. For the scope, PFRS 5 applies to all recognized non-current assets and to all disposal groups for an entity. So, non-current asset is an asset that does not meet the definition of a current asset. So, di ba ang current asset is any asset which can reasonably be expected to be sold, consumed, or exhausted through the normal operations ng isang business within the current fiscal year or the operating cycle or financial year. While yung disposal group naman, it is a group of assets that possibly with some associated liabilities that an entity intends to dispose of in a single transaction. So, non-current assets within the scope of PFRS 5. So, ano nga ba yung mga current assets na nakapaloob lang sa PFRS 5. So, kasama dito yung property, plant, and equipment, which is, ito yung mga companies' physical or tangible long-term assets that typically have a life of more than 1 year. So, example nito is yung mga buildings, machinery, land, office equipment, furnitures, and vehicles. Kasama rin dito yung investment property measured under the cost model, investments in associate or a subsidiary or joint venture, and yung intangible assets. So, intangible assets, di ba ito yung mga asset with no physical form. So, it's a long-term asset that accrues value year over year. So, example ng mga intangible assets, ito yung mga intellectual property, brand recognition, and reputation, relationships, at kasama na rin dito yung goodwill. So, for the next slide, what is about PFRS 5? So, it requires that a non-current asset or disposal group to be classified as held for sale of its carrying amount will be recovered principally through a sale of transaction instead of through continuing use. So, another is assets held for sale to be measured at the lower of the carrying amount and the fair value less cost to sell. Then the depreciation of an asset to cease when it is held for sale. Another one is the separate presentation in the statement of financial position of the asset classified as held for sale and of the assets and liabilities included within a disposal group classified as held for sale, and the separate presentation in the statement of comprehensive income of the results of the discontinued operation. Then let's go to the standard history of this IFRS 5. So, sinasabi dito na in April 2001 daw, the International Accounting Standards Board or the IASB inadapt nila yung IAS 35, which is the discontinued operations, which had originally been issued by the International Accounting Standards Committee in June 1998. So, nung March 2004, the board issued IFRS 5, which is the non-current assets held for sale and discontinued operations, to replace IAS 35. So, na-replace yung replacement ng dating IAS 35 is yung IFRS 5 na ngayon. So, on September 25, 2014, the International Accounting Standards Board issued an annual improvements to IFRS 2012 to 2014 cycle. So, the revised standard has an effective date of January 1, 2016. So, ito yung kumbaga naging history ng from IAS 35 to naging siyang IFRS 5, which is yung ginagamit natin ngayon. So over the years, merong mga amendments to IFRS 5. So isa na dito yung change in methods of disposal. So the amendments clarify the application of the guidance in IFRS 5 or the non-current assets held for sale and discontinued operations. So the guidance is applicable to the case of a change in disposal plan from a plan to sell a division by means of an initial public offering to a plan to spin off a division and distribute a dividend in a kind of its shareholders. So nangyari ito noong February 2013 wherein yung IFRS Interpretations Committee, naka-receive sila ng request from the European Securities and Markets Authority to para ma-clarify yung application of the guidance in IFRS 5 regarding sa classification of a non-current asset or disposal group as held for sale in the case of isa dito yung a disposal plan that is intended to be achieved by means of an initial public offering or yung tinatawag na IPO. But nangyari is the prospectus has not been approved by the securities regulator, and yung isa is a change in disposal plan from a plan that previously qualified as held for sale into a plan to spin off the disposal group and distribute dividend in kind to its shareholders. Then another amendment to IFRS 5 is the discontinued operations. So the final stage, the objective of the project was to develop jointly with the US Financial Accounting Standards Boards a common definition of discontinued operations and to require common disclosures related to disposals of components of an entity. So the two boards each published exposure drafts in September 2008. After considering the feedback, the boards decided to adopt a common definition of a discontinued operation based on the current definition in IFRS 5. So, however, the board did not publish any proposals in this respect. The board decided after the 2015 agenda consultation to carry out a post-implementation reviews of IFRS 5, which is the non-current assets held for sale and discontinued operations. So, with regard to this exposure draft discontinued operations, or ito yung proposed amendments to IFRS 5 is published by the International Accounting Standard Board or yung tinatawag nating IASB for comment only. So ito yung mga comment regarding sa IFRS 5. So the proposals may be modified in the light of the comments received before being issued in the final form as amendments to IFRS 5. So, all the responses will be put on the public record unless the respondent requests confidentiality. So, however, such requests will not normally be granted unless ito supported sila by a good reason such as commercial confidence. So another is the Interpretations Committee has considered a number of questions submitted to it related to this standard. So isa na dito is yung ISRF 5 ng current asset held for sale and discontinued operations noong 2013, which is the classification in conjunction with a planned IPO, yung sinasabi ko kanina. So with this classification in conjunction with a planned IPO, but where the prospectus has not been approved, so hindi na naman inapproved by the securities regulator, the Interpretations Committee received a request to clarify the application of the guidance in IFRS 5 regarding this classification of a non-current asset or disposal group. So, it is as held for sale in the case of disposal plan that is intended to be achieved by means of IPO. But where the prospectus has not yet been approved by the securities regulator, yung submitter as the Interpretations Committee to clarify whether the disposal group would qualify as held for sale before the prospectus is approved by the securities regulator, assuming that all of the criteria in IFRS 5 have been fulfilled. So, itong Interpretations Committee noted that yung paragraph 7 ng IFRS 5 requires that the asset or disposal group must be available for immediate sale in its present condition. So, the subject only to terms that are usual and customary for the sales of such assets, and its sale must be highly probable. So, the Interpretations Committee also note that yung entity should apply the guidance in the paragraph of 8 to 9 ng IFRS 5 para ma-assess whether yung sale of a disposal group by a means of an IPO is highly probable, kung highly probable din ba siya. So, terms that are usual and customary is a matter of judgment based on the facts and circumstances of each sales. So, the Interpretations Committee observed that the following criteria in a paragraph 8 of IFRS 5 represents that must have been occurred. So, ngayon, the Interpretations Committee noted that yung mga criteria na yun would be assessed based on the expectations of the future, and their probability of occurrence would be included in the assessment of whether the sale is highly probable. So, on the basis na diniscuss ko, the Interpretations Committee Ngayon, na-determine nila na in the light of the existing IFRS requirements, mayroong sufficient guidance na nag-exist that neither an interpretation nor an amendment of a standard was necessary. So ngayon, yung ginawa ng Interpretations Committee consequently decided not to add this issue to its agenda. So after the classification in conjunction with a planned IPO, sumunod naman yung nung January 2016, the non-current asset held for sale and discontinued operations, how to present intra-group transactions between continuing and discontinued operations. So dito yung Interpretations Committee, naka-receive sila ng request to clarify how to present intra-group transactions between continuing and discontinued operations. So ngayon, yung submitter, pinoint out niya that yung paragraph 30 of IFRS 5 requires an entity to present and disclose information that enables users of the financial statements to evaluate the financial effects of discontinued operations and disposals of non-current assets or yung disposal group. So, however, itong IFRS 5 does not provide, hindi siya naka-provide ng specific requirements on how to eliminate intra-group transactions between the continuing and discontinued operations. So, yun yung naging problema naman dito. So, another one is the non-current assets held for sale and discontinued operations and other various IFRS 5 related issues. So, mayroon pang mga other various mga issue dito sa IFRS 5. So, dahil nga sa number of unresolved issues dito sa mga amendment, the Interpretations Committee concluded that a broad scope project on IFRS 5 might be warranted. So, in this respect, yung Interpretations Committee noted that itong IFRS 5 was described as a possible research project in the request for views on the 2015 agenda consultation published by the IASB in August 2015. So, consequently, the Interpretations Committee decided not to add these issues to its agenda. So, yun yung mga naging updates sa PFRS 5. So, until now, wala pang bagong update for this standard.
Hello everyone, my name is Jumona Daniela Paet, and our next topic is all about the PFRS 6, or the exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources. An entity applies PFRS 6 to exploration and evaluation expenditure that it incurs, and an entity does not apply PFRS 6 to expenditures incurred. First is before the exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources, such as expenditures incurred before the entity has obtained the legal rights to explore a specific area, and B is after the technical feasibility and commercial viability of extracting a mineral resources are demonstrable. PFRS 6, or the exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources, has the effect of allowing entities adopting the standard for the first time to use accounting policies for exploration and evaluation assets that were applied before adopting PFRS. And it also modifies impairment testing of exploration and evaluation assets by introducing different impairment indicators and allowing the carrying amount to be tested at an aggregate level or not greater than a segment. Ibig sabihin lang naman ng PFRS 6 is yung searching of mineral resources, and it includes the minerals, the oil, the natural gas, and the similar non-regenerative resources after the entity has obtained legal rights to explore in a specific area, and as well as the determination of the technical feasibility and commercial viability of extracting the mineral resources. But before that, ano nga ba talaga ang objective ng PFRS 6, which is the exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources? Number 1 is the objective of this PFRS is to specify the financial reporting for the exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources. Number 2, in particular, the PFRS requires first is the limited improvements to existing accounting practices for exploration and evaluation expenditures. Letter B is the entities that recognize exploration and evaluation assets to assess such as assets for impairment in accordance with this PFRS and measure any impairment in accordance with IAS 36 or the impairment of assets. Letter C is the disclosures that identify and explain the amount in the entity's financial statement arising from the exploration for and the evaluation of mineral resources and help users of those financial statements understand the amount, timing, and certainty of future cash flows from any exploration and evaluation assets recognized. So now let's proceed in the changes in accounting policy optional exemption, which is an entity may change its accounting policies for exploration and evaluation expenditures if the change makes the financial statement more relevant and no less reliable to the economic decision-making needs of users, or more reliable and no less relevant to those needs. To justify the changes in its accounting policies for exploration and evaluation expenditures, an entity shall demonstrate that the change brings its financial statements closer to meeting the criteria in IAS 8, but the change need to achieve full compliance with those criteria. For the elements of cost, exploration, and evaluation asset is an entity determines an accounting policy specifying which expenditures are recognized as exploration and evaluation assets, and the following are examples of expenditures that might be included in the initial measurement of exploration and evaluation asset. A is the acquisition of rights to explore, and the B is the topographical, geological, geochemical, and geophysical studies. C is the exploratory drilling. D is the trenching, and E is the sampling, and for the F is the activities in relation to evaluating the technical feasibility and commercial viability of extracting a mineral resource. The expenditures related to the development of mineral resources shall not be recognized as exploration and evaluation asset. The conceptual framework for financial reporting IAS 38, or the intangible asset, provide the guidance on the recognition of asset arising from development. For the measurement of the recognition is after recognition, an entity shall apply either the cost model or the revaluation model to the exploration and evaluation assets, and if the revaluation model is applied, either the model in IAS 16 or the property, plant, and equipment, or the model in IAS 38. It shall be consistent with the classification of the asset. For the impairment, one or more of the following facts and circumstances indicate that an entity should test exploration and evaluation asset for impairment. The first one is the period for which the entity has the right to explore in the specific area has expired during the period or will expire in the near future and is not expected to be renewed. The second one is the substantive expenditure on further exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources in the specific area is neither budgeted nor planned. The third one is the exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources in the specific area have not led to the discovery of commercially viable quantities of mineral resources, and the entity has decided to discontinue such activity in the specific area. At may daragdag pa akong isa, which is the sufficient data exists to indicate that although a development in the specific area is likely to proceed, and the carrying amount of the exploration and evaluation asset is unlikely to be recovered in full from successful development or by sale. In any such case or similar cases, the entity shall perform an impairment test in the accordance with the IAS 36, and any impairment loss is recognized as an expense in accordance with the IAS 36. For the disclosure, an entity shall disclose information that identifies and explain the amount recognized in each financial statement arising from the exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources. And to comply, the entity shall disclose, the first one is its accounting policies for exploration and evaluation expenditures, including the recognition of exploration and evaluation assets. B is the amounts of assets, the liabilities, the income and expenses, and the operating and investing cash flow arising from the exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources. And an entity shall treat exploration and evaluation assets as a separate classes of assets and make the disclosure required by either the IAS 16 or the IAS 38 consistent with how the assets are classified. And na-issue yung PFRS 6 noong December 9, 2004, and it applies to annual periods beginning on or after January 1, 2006.